2020 was a desolate year for track and field. The sport lost its momentum entirely with the pandemic, and athletes across the world struggled to hold it together as part of their professional career waned before their very eyes. Then 2021 came around, and things would slowly start to formulate, albeit with the heavy restrictions of no crowds and very little interaction. It was an environment many athletes felt isolated in, and this was incredibly evident at the Tokyo Olympics. 2022, though, was the silver lining for the return of athletics. A proper start to an era that brought the likes of so many fresh faces and plenty of jaw-dropping marks that got the sport properly back on its feet. The fans were back, the competitions felt genuine, and the World Championships that year was one of the best produced and enthralling experiences I've ever had the pleasure of watching. With such a strong return to form for the scene, it only felt right that 2023 would be better, and satisfyingly enough, lots of great storylines and surprises would pull through. So let's talk about some of those, starting off with this guy. The sprints felt a little empty this year on the men's side for the most part, but I feel like this guy right here remained a staple that refused to let people take their eyes off of the sport. Noah Lyles has generally been an easy and consistently fun watch, as he's always showing up, personable on the interviews, and he's gained my respect personally for actually experimenting with YouTube, a platform that, for my money, has the most potential to maintain a consistent audience for the sport. When it came to his recent goals though, some of these appeared far-fetched and clickbaity to be like, alright, let's dial it back a bit. Don't get me wrong, Lyles has the talent to run obscenely fast times, and the 200 world record is more in contention than some may think. But when it came to the 100, I think many were doubtful he even had a chance at taking the gold. But then he won a Diamond League race in the 100, made the world team, and people suddenly started believing a bit more. Then Budapest came around and he ran 987 in the semis. Needless to say, I think a small fraction of sprinting fans actually had Lyles as the absolute favorite going in with this type of lineup. So when he showed up and stole the title from the big favorites, it's no surprise he was so emotional afterwards. He defied the expectations of so many that doubted his hard work towards the event, and for him to bring it back in the 2 to destroy everyone there, and to anchor the 4x1 for 3 gold medals, was a triple that I think will go down in history as one of the greatest displays of sprinting dominance we'll see this decade. Unless, of course, he does it again at the Olympics. Women's middle distance was enthralling to watch, mainly because of this woman, and this woman too. When Letizabeth Gide broke the 5K, 10K, 15K, and half marathon world records, this woman right here is the undisputed future of women's distance running. Then Faith Kipyegon reminded us why she's still the real deal, as all of a sudden, she stole back the limelight by breaking the 1500, 5000 meters, and mile records back to back to back. That mile race was also obscenely quick in general. I don't think we're gonna see something like that for a while again. Also, how many 5,000 meter races did Kipyegon even race before that record anyways? 2, which was back in 2015? Alongside then was Sifan Hassan, who rolls up and spontaneously wins one of the most stacked women's marathons for her debut, and goes on to run marks like this just a couple months later on the track. It goes without question that these two athletes have unlocked a new level of versatility I didn't even think was possible in this era of track and field. Especially Hassan when she opted to compete in the 10,000, 5,000, and 1,500 for the crazy triple at Worlds. Even though she didn't win any of these events, she still put on a hell of a show, and Kipyegon did her thing so confidently to pull off the first ever 1500 5000 double gold at a world championship. What I wasn't expecting the most though was the 5000 record to be broken again in Eugene, where Gudaf Sagai finally got her first ever world record, further inching ever so closely to that legendary sub-14 barrier. Next year's gonna be crazy for this genre of events, I just know it. There's no figurehead in track and field quite as polarizing as Shikari Richardson. Being perhaps the most talented 100-meter sprinter since FloJo, it was heartbreaking to see her career and life trajectory take such a tragic turn a couple years back, spiraling into borderline manic episodes on and off the track. While she hasn't made a single notable team up until this point, and was wildly inconsistent on all fronts, it seemed like Shikari finally rediscovered that version of herself she's been seeking in 2023, displaying her most consistent season by far, and even taking her first ever USA title to qualify for her first world championship. There was a ton of anticipation pouring over Shikari fans though, given this was her first time on the big stage. Despite a shaky semis performance where she was half asleep at the gun, she was still probably unbeatable on paper with a good gun start. And after running 10:65 to take the world title, and anchoring the 4x1 for 2 gold medals with the fastest anchor leg in history, this is what I and many hope to be the birth of Shikari's golden era. Ryan Krauszer is the dark horse of the track and field mainstream. There's really no one quite like him in terms of the sheer amount of top-level performances he's been able to churn out, and yes, even more than Mondo. With a resume of 23-meter marks that will likely never be rivaled, throwing fans were ecstatic to see what kind of throws he'd be putting out this year. And man, did he manage to deliver. Boom, 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 boom. Most of these throws would all land him well in the top 5 all-time list, but when Budapest came around, fans were instantly worried when he reported 2 small blood clots in one of his legs. While he was more than in contention of winning yet another international title with this throw, it was a bit disappointing but completely understandable that he couldn't land anything above 23 meters. That was until this bomb that looked like he threw a baseball, and that was when Krauszer solidified himself yet again as not just the greatest shot putter to ever live, but one of the greatest track and field athletes to grace the sport. Bobby Kersee has been a contentious topic in the last couple years, especially this year when his 2 biggest stars raced a total of 8 times between the two throughout indoor and outdoor track. His unnecessarily cryptic reasons for pulling athletes out at times have annoyed athletics fans for a little while now. I mean, Kersee hasn't had the greatest history as far back as the 80s, but his campy approach to racing has been more blatant than ever, and fans are becoming increasingly frustrated at this point. As for these 2 stars, a thing Mo has gone on record expressing her conflicting feelings towards track, so it wasn't too surprising to not see her that often. Not to mention, she had allegedly been dealing with personal life issues, and likely other things under the surface that is none of our business. I think as fans of the sport though, we do have a right to be frustrated with the lack of attendance from the very people who keep the sport somewhat in the public eye, but then there's other times where these athletes are real people, and that they are not going to improve every single season, or have the motivation to perform at their absolute best. It was nice to see her at Worlds, and it was great to see her break the American record at the Pre-Classic, but at the end of the day, I still struggle to understand why she, or her coach, is allergic to showing up at these Diamond League events, but nevertheless, I do look forward to seeing her in Paris. In Sydney's case though, I'm a little more confused. She ran some 4s, ran them well, and she's out of Worlds entirely. How bad her knee injury actually is up for speculation, but I'm just saying, Krauszer won Worlds with one of the best throws ever with 2 blood clots. Whether it's a byproduct of Kersey's coaching, or the lack of desire for these two to show up to non-championship races despite there being no financial hardships on them to do so, this crew needs to learn how to communicate better. The fact that people had to figure out whether or not a thing Mo is racing at Worlds through if a gambling site had her listed or not, and by physically seeing her there without any prior announcement, is pretty unacceptable. It's likely Kersey and company will continue to be annoyingly opaque as time goes on, but nevertheless, I still am very curious to see how they'll fare with the Olympic season coming up. Yakov Ingebrigtsen turned a lot of heads as a teenager, and is continuing to turn more and more today. As his resume grows, the more his confidence and arrogance comes into full fruition. It's like he's designed to generate just as much hate as he does love from the track and field community, and the sport really could use some of that in all fairness, especially in the longer distances where it's naturally a much more passive environment. Yakov's Diamond League bonanza was pretty much as perfect as it could have gone, going entirely undefeated, demolishing Komen's iconic 2-mile world record, and inching ever so closely to that sweet 1500-meter record held by El Garouge. Going into the World Championships though, it was pretty clear that Yakov was the unanimous favorite by far in the 15, and a fair contender in the 5000 despite not racing it a single time prior. Although, in the last 200 meters of the 15, another Brit would get the best of him, as Josh Kerr would take another 1500 title away from Yakov. Was he sick? How sick was he? Who knows, honestly. But he did come back to win the 5000, smashed El Garouge's 2K world record, and ran the best middle distance double in history, so he definitely redeemed himself regardless. I'm not 100% sure how record-hungry Yakov will be in 2024, but given his desire to win any and all races he puts himself in, which is a lot, it's going to be a good year regardless now that we know what he's truly capable of. Cabal has easily become a new favorite to watch in the 400 and 400 hurdles. Why? Not just because she's absurdly consistent and posts fast times, but well, because she actually shows up to race too. I shouldn't have to say this, but it is such a refreshing environment to see an athlete of this caliber race so often, and it's not like she's held back a single final she entered too. As with 2 indoor world records, multiple 1250 plus tier marks, and inching towards what was thought to be an untouchable athlete's record, Cabal deserves all the respect and praise she's gotten over the last couple years. At Worlds, it was tragic to see her falter just shy of a few meters for what could have been an amazing gold medal for the Netherlands. But then she came back and demolished everyone in the 400-meter hurdles. What added to this seemingly odd string of dramatic occurrences, the USA women's 4x4 team got DQ'd in the heats out of all things. And all of a sudden, the Netherlands had another legitimate shot at their first ever relay gold. Of course, with Cabal on the anchor, it was no question that if the gap was close enough that she could make up the deficit. And after running a phenomenal leg to secure the gold for the Netherlands, this woman should be on everyone's radar going into 2024, because by God does she still have a lot more to offer at just the age of 23. Now, there were plenty of other fantastic performances and storylines that were an absolute treat to watch, so here's a few that stood out to me as honorable mentions, while it closed things out. 2023 was a very solid year for track and field, despite its hiccups. Yes, there were athletes we didn't get to see race, whether they pulled out, were injured, and more, but the amount of absurd marks and storylines we got to watch unfold in real time within a single season will undoubtedly be looked back on as landmarks these athletes will want to strive towards as the 2020s continue. With that said, the track and field videos won't cease from here entirely, but expect a transition to cross-country and maybe even some strength sport videos until track boots up again. Until then though, here's to another great year of athletics. I'll see you on whatever video I upload next, and take care.